All right, perfect. All right, let's do it. Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mix It Up with ML, this brand new podcast that I'm hosting where I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing at all, but I'm just going to try it. And here we go. Here goes nothing. So, first episode of this podcast, we have Mona Clapier. Am I pronouncing that right? Geez, Mona, the last name.
Clapier, whatever you want to go with, all correct.
That's kind of brutal because Mona's like one of my best friends and I just asked her how to pronounce her last name, so we're off to a rough start. But Mona Clapier, whatever. We have Mona here, and Mona is an absolute stud and legend who is a Frisbee champion at Princeton. We met at Princeton, and we'll go into like how we met. But Mona is a Frisbee champion. She is a cooking icon. She cooks a lot, and so we're going to ask her a lot about her cooking. And Mona is also my near and dear pre-med buddy. So we've been through everything together. So we'll touch on a little bit of medicine, but basically this podcast is called Mix It Up with ML because I try to mix it up every episode, talk about, a variety of topics and just kind of go from there. So hopefully there's something for everybody. But yeah, welcome, Mona.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. I am super honored to be the first guest on Mix It Up with ML. Don't quite know how I earned this spot, but super excited.
Of course. Mo was the first person I thought of, and she's already addressing the audience like anybody's going to listen. So we'll see. But I think so with Mona as the guest, people will listen. So yeah, Mona, let's just get right into it. I figure the first thing, because we're both not famous at the moment, I feel like people would want to know, how we met and just sort of our backstory. So we can talk a little bit about that, but feel free to, start it off.
Yeah, sure. So Michael and I met at Princeton, literally, I think day one of Princeton. We were on the same orientation trip. We had a community service trip called Community Action at Princeton. And we were on a healthcare focus group, I believe. And so our group was filled with a bunch of aspiring pre-meds, and that's how I met Michael.
Very fitting.
Totally did not think I would become best friends with him because, he's double my height, this basketball superstar, and didn't at all think we'd have any similar interests. But that definitely was proven wrong in the subsequent years at Princeton. So I would say we started being friends initially, but then we became really close, I think, our junior year.
I think so.
Michael joined the same neuroscience lab that I was in.
Shout out Gould Lab. Wearing this t-shirt, did not mean to wear it, but we're wearing it. But yeah, go ahead.
In fact, I almost wore it. And particularly after our junior year for the summer, we stayed on campus for 2-ish months, every day in the lab and also studying for the MCAT together. And so we were next door neighbors that summer.
Indeed.
And so that's how we really got closer. And I don't know about you, Michael, but I think you are the reason why I even made it this far in this med school cycle. So you mean the world to me. So this is so exciting to be a part of.
Mona, you're very kind, but everybody who's listening, Mona is a superstar. So she would have made it this far. She's very kind though. But you're very right. We did forge, I hadn't thought of it like that. Like when we became super, super close was definitely through suffering junior summer with MCAT. I didn't even, right?
Definitely.
Because we were in the same classes, like freshman, sophomore year. And then we joined CAT, which is our eating club, which you can, if you want to explain that a little bit, but we joined CAT together and then, but it wasn't until junior year, in particular the summer. Yeah.
It was cemented. It was joint struggle. Nothing about that summer I regret, and every experience had there made me who I am. But it's really helpful to have somebody there next to you that's going through both research and thesis and pre-med stuff. Right. And just is an overall fun person to be around. So
likewise, Mo. Yeah, actually now you say that, I remember when I feel like we were walking out of physics or biochem and you were just telling me I think I'm going to take a gap year. Right. And so that might've been part of like why,
Yeah.
we hadn't like fully like connected, at least on the pre-med level
Yeah.
until then, because like you were like thinking about going direct into med school, right?
Yes. So for everyone who's listening, I was definitely so excited about going to med school and didn't really even consider a gap year at all in the beginning. Not because I looked down on it, but really it was just like, there's this really long path ahead of me. Why delay it any longer? But basically during junior year, I hit that point that I think everyone hits sometime in their lifetime. And for me, that was in college, where like I was just trying to do too many things, and really took a toll on my mental health. And like I talked to a few people who had chosen to take a gap year, and no one regretted it. And so it's like, okay, let me take the gap year. That'll allow me to spread out, all the activities I'm doing, give more time to my friends, my family, and also like maintain sane throughout it all. So yeah, that's when I decided to take a gap year, and why I took the MCAT during the summer instead.
Right.
Yeah.
Because so we would have been doing research together that summer, like likely, right? Even if
Yep.
you had gone direct, but then it was like, the after hours that we were also spending together. So that's definitely when we got closer for sure.
Definitely.
Okay. So I guess while we're on the medical topic, we can just kind of keep going that way.
Yep.
So what are you doing this gap year, Mo? Let the people know. I know a little bit, but I also want to ask you more about it and just like hear about sort of the nuts and bolts. I feel like we haven't talked about that too much.
Sure. So going into it, I knew I wanted to do something that was more medical focused, because a lot of the research opportunities at Princeton were very, basic science focused and not very clinical. And for example, the lab that we worked with mouse models and looked at like anxiety disorders and that kind of thing, and neural circuits related to that, but it wasn't specifically working with patients and humans. And so I knew for the gap year, I wanted more of that kind of experience. And I also wanted to do something that was sort of brand new to me, even within medicine. So previously I'd done some shadowing with like pediatric doctors or OBGYN doctors, but had not really done too much in surgery. And so I was looking for surgery / clinical research assistant jobs. And then I ended up interviewing for the place I have now in February, the position I have now. It's a research assistant job in the Division of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery at Northwell, which is a health system in New York State. And honestly, when I walked into the interview, didn't even think it was going to be my top choice, because it was out in Long Island and I would have to commute from New York City if I wanted to live in New York City. But I went, and the people were so welcoming.
Right.
My mentor, Dr. Tana, is like amazing, just so charismatic, and I knew I'd get a lot out of it the year. And I'm glad I followed my instincts and took on the job, because it's really been an amazing position and experience.
That's super dope. So it's actually called like the Surgical Scholars Program, right?
Yeah.
So like, can you just tell me, like more about it? Like, I know you told me you were doing like 2 days at home most of the time. Like it could vary, right? But like maybe like 3 in clinic and then 2 at home. And so can you just tell me more about like what are you doing? Are you doing clinical research? Or I know you're helping put on a conference and stuff like that. Maybe.
Definitely.
I think I was correct.
Yeah. So it's like a mix of a bunch of things, which I like about it a lot. So every day is a little bit different. I currently work on a hybrid schedule because of COVID. So prior to COVID, the research assistants every year were going in 5 times a week.
Right.
But with my situation, they made it so that I'm still getting the most out of like the in-person patient interaction and surgery experience, but then also minimizing unnecessary travel. So the 2 to 3 days a week that I actually go in, it could be anything from I'm in the doctor's office shadowing a physician, seeing all of the pre-op and post-op meetings between the patients and the doctors. It could also mean actually going into the OR and seeing the surgeries and actually standing at the table and sometimes getting to scrub in as well, which has been super crazy.
And suture, I heard you're suturing a little bit.
They're gonna teach me and train me. So
super dope.
which is so valuable to even know
Yeah.
know how to do that before medical school. So that's been so exciting. And also just like being in the hospital environment full time is really cool. And it's been very reassuring because I realize that I actually enjoy it. And I know now that I'm committing myself to a career that I know I'm going to enjoy. So that's been great. And then on the 2 to 3 days, depending on the week that I spend at home, it's more working on my computer. And rather than like a wet lab that we worked in at the Gould Lab, it's more like working on the computer, working with data, maybe writing a few papers. And the clinical research is very much focused on things like quality improvement for the specific procedures that they do, or how to shorten OR times and increase efficiency within the operating room and flipping cases and such. So yeah, and then we also do a few conferences throughout the year. So I recently helped with a transgender care conference that they did at Northwell, and basically was the contact person to sort of bring together all of these speakers, and we did it over Zoom, so I helped handle that as well.
Right.
And then we did a similar one for cleft and craniofacial care. So yeah.
Wow. Damn, well, I literally have so many questions about that.
Shoot.
Yeah. So, okay. So awesome. Very, very cool. All those experiences. I love how you can do both, right? And I guess it's in the name, surgical scholar. So you get to do the surgery and like the clinical part of it, but then also the scholarship. And just like the first thing off the top of my head was you were sort of drawing the comparison between the wet lab and then the clinical research type thing. And I think that's really interesting for us to think about. And then, anybody who's pre-med or anything listening to this, like, I felt like, so I was reading, I love Atul Gawande. That's my boy. I love him.
Reading Better right now. It's on my note table.
You're reading it? No way.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah. So for the listeners, Better is this book written by Dr. Atul Gawande, who's kind of this all-star physician who he's a surgeon, but also a public health researcher. And like a lot of that public health stuff is clinical research. He's also an author, obviously, because he wrote this book. But long story short, in Better, he kind of talks about, obviously we really need that wet lab, like basic research to like progress and find novel treatments and novel therapies, right? And like genes that affect things and like figure that out, because we don't know any of that. But he was saying like, it's also really important, and we shouldn't snub our noses at like clinical research, because you sort of look at that as like, basic is the world that we don't know much about. And then clinical research, you can kind of look at it as, outcomes focused research. So looking at like the procedures that we have, and then the treatments that we have, like what can we do to make those better and have improved outcomes? And he kind of was talking about when he went to India to do surgery with these surgeons who have far like fewer resources than him. And they were like doing surgeries better than he was doing them in America with far superior technology. So he's like, I found that really interesting. And I don't know if what you think about sort of that comparison between basic and clinical. I don't know.
Definitely. I think both are very important. And what's cool about it is like, depending on the person's your personality, you'll find sort of a place in research that makes sense for you. I think, I don't know if you ever felt this, but as a pre-med, the pressure is sort of like, you need to be really into research and, working in the lab and pipetting and growing cell cultures. And that stuff is awesome too. It's cool too. But then there's also, for me, I found quickly that it wasn't necessarily those days that I found exciting, but more like once I gathered the data and I looked at what was significant and what was the impact of that, like that was the more interesting part for me. And I didn't find the other stuff that exciting. And I think that's true generally of all scientists. Obviously the results are what's enjoyable, but like I do think you do need to be able to enjoy the process as well. And for me, my interests in science were very medical. And so the research, the type of research that I'm doing now is a lot more tangible for me, because I can see exactly how it's going to impact a patient, rather than sort of an abstract idea of like how my anxiety disorders develop due to early life stress, for example, which was my
Mhm.
thesis.
Mo wrote a great
now,
thesis, everybody. Go check it out. Go
no.
ahead.
I did the best I could during pandemic times, but yeah, I think both are very important, and the clinical research is definitely really cool, and seeing like all about what can we do better than what we have now, even if you like, there's always room for improvement, I think.
Exactly.
And that's something that I've seen throughout my work here too, is like, you know, they're like top plastic surgeons in the country, and they've been doing certain procedures for years, but all of them are very committed to finding ways to what they make do more efficient or better or easier for the patient. And it's really cool that they actually care about that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so like how are their schedules kind of split up the same way as you? Right. Because you know, we're both kind of interested in surgery and like
Yeah.
and also like potentially doing that sort of research. And so like does the surgeon that you shadow have like sort of a research day on the same day that you do? Or what's that breakdown look like?
So for them, they find time to do research outside of all their clinical duties, and their clinical duties, I get a sense, comes first. And so what's really cool about my position is very independent. So I'm not 24/7 with the surgeon. And so for the surgeon, he is in maybe the office seeing patients, maybe 20, 25 patients a day, once a week. And he's on the sort of a lower end of the spectrum,
Wow.
in the sense that like some of the surgeons that I work with see 50 patients a day. But they spend 1 or 2 days a week in the office just talking to patients and checking up on them after surgery. And then I'd say 3 to 4 days a week, they're actually in the operating room. If it's a long procedure, they'll just have one case. If it's a couple short ones, they might have 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then from what I can see from my mentor, at least, and I think every person sort of does it differently, but he does either stuff after the cases, like later in the afternoon, he'll just check some of my work or, you know, give me comments, feedback. And then he'll also take time on the weekends, like weekend mornings, he'll look at stuff online and send me stuff. But I think it's really cool because he chooses to do that. Obviously there are going to be times as a doctor where you do have to give extra time and it's not going to be your normal 9 to 5, but I know that at least with my mentor, he makes it a priority to do a lot of research. And, you know, he's 40 now, so it's not like he has to do a lot of research, but he likes it, he enjoys it. That's why he devotes time to it on the weekends. And even just like having me as a student, like he doesn't have to have a gap year student program, but he enjoys the mentorship and he likes being able to train young individuals and motivate them. So that's why he gives the time to do that. And I think that brings us to like, that we've discussed this before about like how it's really cool in medicine, you can kind of shape your career, at least down the line, into focusing on what kind of things do you enjoy doing. And for some people that might mean seeing patients 5 days a week and not working on research at all.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. Yeah, like I feel like in the academic setting, it seems like you can kind of like pick and choose what you want to do within the academic setting. So like if you want to do research and operate or see patients and like medical education, right? And like mentorship and teach at the medical school. So it seems like at least I was speaking with my mom who's like a family physician and Mo knows. I always talk with her about I'm very fortunate to have her perspective and like her help to navigate all this because I can't imagine it's already tough as anything for me to do it. So she's been a great resource. But she was saying like in academic medicine, you can kind of go wherever you want with it and do those different things. And then if you want to go into private practice after that, you can, which was a very interesting thing as opposed to like, if you're not sure, like just going into private practice, then maybe I feel like it's harder to transition into academic. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then sort of on that research front, I was thinking about this. I wanted to get your ideas on this. Is like, have you ever thought about the relevance of coding to a doctor?
I think the medical field would very much benefit from people who are good coders, and like it's lacking. The medical field is lagging in that part, and all of the people, the talent is going to tech and, you know, maybe finance, but there's so many places where computer science would help in the medical world. But also, you and I know, like when you're studying medicine, it's hard to be jack of all trades. No time. And like I have very, 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 very basic computer science skills from Princeton.
Did you take COS 126?
COS 126.
I didn't take it.
I actually loved it. It was fun, but I don't know nearly enough to do anything, I think. And also, I think statistical knowledge, like statistics, I know is a weak point for me, but is actually very, very helpful in science and in medicine particularly. I know on the projects that we work on, we work with the biostatistics team at Northwell sometimes on our projects, because we want someone that's, you know, that's all that they do and that's really their forte. So, but yeah, I think it would be awesome if you could do both. And that's something I think a lot of people, or most people, should take in college, just to have the intro to it. Even if you can't do it yourself, like having the framework of like what it's even remotely like, I think is useful given the way our world is progressing right now.
Yeah, like I'm a moron. I didn't take it because I was worried about like my GPA, and I was like, I'm getting slammed, so I can't take COS.
Well, it was a requirement for me, to be fair.
For neuro made you take it, which is smart, because I was psych, so Mona was neuro, but we were in like the same lab because there's a lot of crossover. But that's so interesting, because I asked because I was thinking about that from the research perspective, like at the very minimum, having coding skills for data science, right? And, like I did clinical research one summer, and like I was doing a lot of the literature work and like extracting the relevant data and helping write up like our study and everything. And like I actually really like statistics and feel like I'm pretty good with it, but it's a difference between knowing statistics like in an academic setting and then being able to like do like literally the data science process with your data to get everything that you need and all your data out there. So like the PI like did it, but she was a doctor and had all that ability. And Mo, are you frozen? I'm not sure if you're frozen. Might have a little lag. Mo, you there? Mo, you there?
Sorry, I think it was cutting out.
I think it cut out for a little bit.
Can you hear me fine now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where did I drop off?
I think I heard most of it. You were saying PI was doing most of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was just thinking to myself, like, where'd she get those skills? Or is she outsourcing that to like, you know, like the biostatistics team and everything? So I was just kind of thinking about that, you know, in my gap year, because I have a little bit more time on my hands. I was like, damn, like, should I be kind of like exposing myself to tech and everything?
Yeah. I think it's definitely an investment that will pay off. But also I know it's hard like I've taken a couple classes where I sort of learned different language. So I did like R in a pol stats class, a political science class. And then I did Julia in one of my mathematical tools classes, and then I did Python, and it was just scattered all over the place, and the languages are similar but different enough where it didn't build on top of each other, and now I feel like I don't know anyone in the language very well. But yeah, I think if you spend even just like a couple months working at it, I'm sure it's very helpful.
I feel it's definitely interesting to kind of see where the medical field was going. And like you were saying, like it's probably a useful skill given how our world is progressing, and our like medicine needs to be more just electronic in general, I think. So that's a very interesting thing, and we'll see where that goes. But sort of on the vein of the gap year, and you know, just how it's been like sort of what's been, you know, some things bring you joy, what's been some challenges over your gap year, things you've learned, just experiences you've had. I know it's COVID, so you know, it's not what we had hoped for, but kind of walk me through a little bit of your gap year musings.
Yeah. I'll start off by saying I've been very fortunate with my job, just the fact that I've even had an in-person component, and I feel like I'm not really missing out on that kind of professional development side of my gap year. And I'm very, very lucky to be able to say that. I think the main challenges are the more personal ones that, again, like there are people that have been through so much worse during this time. But I think, for example, my immediate family lives currently in London. And I quarantined with my father from March to June of last year when our campus got shut down. And then I haven't seen him since. Also, my mother I haven't seen since last January. So it's been a full year now, and my little sister as well. So I think the toughest thing, I mean, it always has been tough to be far away from family, but it's never been a situation where I can't go see him if I physically just can't get on a plane and go see them without worrying about their safety or my safety. So that's been tough. And then I lost my grandfather last year in the summer, and he was in Japan. Everyone's like, where are you from? They're confused. I should probably explain.
And I'm going to ask you about that. So keep going though. Yeah, no worries.
So my grandparents, sneak peek, live in Japan. But my grandfather passed away not due to COVID, but from leukemia last summer. And so not being able to go see him and also not being able to comfort my grandmother in person has been tough. But that being said, like, we are all very healthy otherwise, and we have FaceTime and we can text and call each other. And like, there's not that much to complain about. I think I've found, so for example, you called me, like Frisbee extraordinaire or whatever in the beginning, which I don't think I deserve that title, especially now because I haven't touched a Frisbee since last March.
Yeah. Self-deprecating as always.
Yeah, well, no. Really, I haven't touched one. So I think like that, for example, was a really great way for me to relieve my stress, and also was a huge part of my social life in college. Whereas now I work out in my apartment, and that's sort of the only like active thing I do now. And also I'm missing out on the huge social component, which, to be fair, I'm actually not a huge extrovert, but I think this time in quarantine has made me realize that there are things about talking to other people that really like restore me and make me excited about life. And even just like one-on-one conversations like this, I know are important. And I think I didn't realize that. I always thought I was an introvert and didn't really like really hanging out with people all the time. But yeah, it made me value those interactions more.
I think your story is definitely very similar to mine, and probably very similar to a lot of people, at least who are taking a gap year right now. So
yeah,
what's it been like as far as, as far as exercising? Like, what have you done? Because I know, we're very similar in terms of we both played club sports at Princeton, and then like you got to kind of transition away from the sport, especially with COVID, right? Like, you can't play Frisbee, I can't play ball. So, what kind of exercises are you doing? Like, are you a big yoga fan? I'm pretty sure.
Yes. So I do a lot of like HIIT workouts now at home. Sometimes I do a little bit of Pilates. And then I'm currently doing a yoga with Adrian 30-day challenge on YouTube. I've never really gotten into meditation until I want to say the last 2 months.
Wow. We could talk about that. I'm hyped to hear about that. Go ahead.
I had this feeling that I needed to be more mentally aware. And I think I read an article about like working out your mind. And like, I thought, like I work out my body all the time, I do push-ups and try to build strength, but like I need to gain mental strength too. Not that I was weak before, but I think it's always better to be self-aware and things. So this like yoga challenge, the yoga itself isn't very intense, but there's a lot of focus on like your breathing and like not controlling, but listening to your thoughts and being comfortable with them. And I've done it for 21 days now, I think. Very nice. I like see the difference. Like I can get myself to that like state of calm a little bit easier than when I first started it. So those are some things that I'm working on, but mostly I'm doing like HIIT workouts at home. I'm not a huge, run for 3 miles, 5 miles outside kind of girl. I used to run a lot for Frisbee to train for it, but not so much now. And I realize you just have to find something that like works for you.
Right.
And for me, that just happens to be 20-30 minute intense workouts. And usually I just follow a video or something on YouTube or whatever, Instagram. Like so many people do lives now. But yeah, I've been impressed because I always thought that I needed a gym membership or access to a gym. And I've gone an entire year without one.
Yeah. So many thoughts. I mean, everybody who knows me knows I could talk about meditation for forever. So I definitely want to ask you about
Tell
that.
me, yes.
But like, I love the point you make about the gyms, which is like kind of sad also, because I feel like a lot of gyms are gonna, I don't know. I feel like it goes two ways. I've heard people talk about it in terms of either in quarantine, you started working out way more or like you lost all your workout. And like, I'm not trying to like brag or like, oh my God, like I'm doing great. But like for me, I actually struggled a lot more to work out in the normal times. Like at Princeton, I was not getting to the gym the way I should have. I felt like I couldn't like juggle academics and social life and get to the gym. It was like impossible for me. So like I've actually been more consistent with my workouts now. So I feel like gyms I feel like they might lose like half of their, clientele or whatever. But anyway, I just think that's interesting what you said. And then, so you're doing HIIT and yoga, and then you kind of incorporate meditation into your yoga. So what's sort of your breakdown? Do you do HIIT like every other day and then yoga on the off days, or like, how do you kind of work that in?
So with my work schedule, I found that the days that I'm going in, it's just so hard for me to fit in a full workout, especially because I commute out to Long Island. And so my commute ends up being at least an hour each way, which honestly, if I made it a priority, I could probably fit it in, but I'm just not doing that. But what's good about my schedule is 2 to 3 times a week, I'm also at home. So on the days I'm at home, I'm sitting all day at a desk. And so by the time 5 o'clock rolls around, I'm so ready to get out.
Absolutely.
And so I usually do the HIIT workout and then I like cool down with the yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. And then some mornings, if I'm working from home, I'll also do sort of like a meditation in the morning before I start my day. Have my little coffee or matcha or whatever I'm having that day. And it's like a little routine.
Right.
But on the days I'm going in, I'm waking up early and I'm, barely making it out of the door on time. So I'm just not pushing myself to do that. So yeah, I don't know if I work out necessarily as much as I used to. But when I do, it's very intense and I like try to make sure it's worth it.
No, I feel like sort of circling back to it is like what you mentioned about it's so hard when you like the commute is a big factor. Like I feel like in terms of time and energy and everything, like that's what I need to work on is like continuing my exercise habit when the commute becomes a thing again in the future, right? Like, so I actually try to work out in the morning because I struggle to like, after I'm sitting for a lot of the day, I like struggle to get that energy. So like, I'm not sure how that's going to go when I have to commute in the morning. But what I love about like, you were saying you sort of incorporate meditation and mindfulness into your yoga. I feel like that's really important for just people to hear in general, because I think there's this idea in culture, like that's going to take a long time to like get rid of, but it's like meditation has to be like that sort of thing where like you're in this crazy state and like there's no like distractions and it's just not the same as real life. But I think like the idea, at least in my meditation practice that I kind of work with and think about a lot is, you can have those 10 minutes or whatever where you're just sitting down and doing it. But what really matters is that you kind of live mindfully and you do your daily activities mindfully, right? And I think yoga is a great way to get into that mindful, state while you're in daily life and not just sitting on a pillow cushion or whatever, right? So I just think that's so interesting and good for you. And so that's through a YouTube video or somebody's doing that with you?
So there's 2 things I do depending on the day. So I do yoga with Adrienne sometimes.
And who's Adrienne? Influencer?
She is a like yoga YouTuber. She's been on YouTube for years.
Okay.
And she's so soothing and calming, and she has a dog in every one of her videos. It's the best.
Critical.
And then I sometimes use Insight Timer, which is an app on the phone.
Right.
But that brings me to Headspace. We need to talk about your Headspace achievements.
No.
If everyone doesn't know, Michael is like, I'm talking about mindfulness, like I know what I'm talking about, but like Michael is the real veteran here when it comes to meditation. Would you care to talk a little bit more about that?
Mo putting me on a pedestal unfairly here, but yeah, so I use Headspace, which is like a meditation app, and I feel like what I like about it is sort of a lot of what I just said. And I think these are becoming more and more popular now, but at least when I started like 4 years ago, I started meditating, I think like senior year of high school or something like that, kind of as a way to like prep for basketball games. And
Okay.
I found this app to be nice because it's this guy who was a Buddhist monk and just kind of came from Eastern society into the Western society, trying to bring meditation through this app. And so, yeah, it's a really cool app. You could do Calm, you could do Insight Timers, another one I actually haven't heard of. I think Calm's actually bigger than Headspace in terms of subscribers, so that's a great one. But yeah, I'm like closing in on like 10,000 minutes, Mo, so I'm excited about that. But
10,000
yeah, but I feel like
How
they
often
say
do you do it?
so I do it like every day, 10 minutes in
Okay.
the morning, but
Wow.
definitely not consistently over the past 4 years. It was never like every
Right.
day. Like I would struggle to find that routine.
Yeah.
But I've been able to hit a good streak now. And I think again, it's kind of like the pandemic. I'm getting good habits in the pandemic in some ways.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to hope that they'll translate back to normal life. But Headspace has been like meditation has become way more consistent for me in
That's
quarantine.
so awesome.
Yeah.
That is something that I would never have guessed about you when I first met you. You know, like
Really?
just like this like basketball guy like meditates every morning. It's awesome. Yeah, destigmatize that stuff for sure.
Yeah. Like and I feel like a lot of like the top performers do it. Like I
Yeah.
kind of got inspired by Kobe and
Yeah.
LeBron and all those guys and Jordan. So like just, literally the top players kind of talked about the importance of that. So I think it's become a little more mainstream now. So I think
Yeah,
it's a
I
good
agree.
thing. I think.
Definitely. And with COVID too, I think there was a lot of focus on just mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
So that's that. And then like on this vein of hobbies in quarantine, Mo, I got to ask you about your cooking journey. I got to ask
Sure,
you about
yeah.
that.
So I haven't been able to play frisbee, so I had to pick up a new hobby.
Right.
And cooking has sort of been that new hobby that I've developed, mainly because now I have a kitchen, and at Princeton in the dorms, you didn't have your own kitchen. And yeah, I think I actually find it very calming. My boyfriend also really likes to cook, and that was something that he developed in quarantine with me as well.
There you go.
So it's a really fun activity for us to do together, where we're not just like scrolling on our phones and sitting on the couch. And we sort of like, when we finish our work day, we just go to the kitchen and like start making something.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, a very helpful, positive influence on my life. Also because we both love to eat, and we haven't been able to really go out to restaurants as much. So like we make the stuff we want to eat now, which is awesome. And it's like a lifelong skill, no one can take away from me. So yeah, it's been fun. And I like to make a bunch of things. So not just, my boyfriend, part of his family is Italian. So, we learned his grandma's sauce a few months back, keeping those traditions going. But then also like I'll cook stuff, just Japanese dishes, honestly, anything will do. I think I'm going to try and do like a Thai curry later this week. Just a bunch of things we want to try. Yeah, it's good.
Dude, that's awesome. Everybody needs to, right now, I got to plug Mona's Instagram.
Mona's Kitchen Story.
Mona's Kitchen Story, spelled like Mona, her name, M-O-N-A. And then everybody knows how to spell Kitchen Story, I think, on Instagram. And go check it out for some delectable meals. She's really crushing it on there. I got it up there, so I had to plug it.
I literally don't even post on my normal original Instagram account anymore. And I basically follow a bunch of other foodies
Right.
on my kitchen story account, and it's awesome because it's like, sometimes you go on social media and it's all like a negative thing or something, but like when I go on my cooking account, it's just food and like
Right.
where I go to get inspired and talk about things that I like. So yeah.
Right. No, and I love what you said about how you and Jay, your boyfriend, kind of just do it together, and it's something you have to do every day because you got to eat, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Unless you want to order out, which is not, the
Yeah.
greatest thing if you can afford not to. Like, I feel like that's something I'm trying to work on is, that I said Mona, like all these pictures and vids, like ML's working in the kitchen, trying to
He
be like
is.
you, Mona. But I'm like so rudimentary, but I feel like it's a good thing to try to get in the mindset of enjoying that and kind of saying like, I got to do this anyway, so I might as well make it fun. And so like, do you have any tips for me? Like you said, you get inspired from like Insta foodies and stuff. Like, I kind of do like, I feel like I've told you, I do the same thing on every day, like weekly. So like Tuesdays, my spaghetti and pasta. And and it's great. Like it's nice routine, but like, do you have any tips for trying to get more into that and just getting more out of your cooking? I don't know.
Definitely. I honestly understand that struggle. Like even though we cook a lot, we end up making a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Like we have pasta once a week on Mondays or whatever. Tips I have, I think we got a couple cookbooks recently, and just like flipping through that is always fun because you kind of see things that you would never thought you'd make, but it looks good, so you try it out. And I guess Instagram is the same way too. You kind of see people making stuff and you just try it out. And in terms of making the process a lot more enjoyable, I think it's enjoyable when you like cut and prepare all of your ingredients first. I think they call it mise en place or something like that in French.
A little French.
And Jason also says this as well, but like you prepare all your stuff and you just have it there, and then you go on to the cooking process, and it's just like less chaotic. Everything's clean. I don't know. It makes the process way more enjoyable for both of us. And it sounds really stupid when I'm just talking about it like this, but like you prepare all your stuff first, and then you just like bring it over to whatever, the stove, and then you start cooking on the pan.
Mo, that sounds genius. Doesn't sound stupid at all. Like you're giving me two tangible ideas here. I'm always about tangible. So we got cookbook, and then I want to like mise en place, set it up, right? And so do you set it up like, you don't set up early in the day because you don't want the food to go bad, but you're saying just segmenting your cooking experience to like getting everything out and then doing it. Okay.
It's not necessarily the most efficient time-wise, because sometimes it's like more efficient time-wise to just like cut the garlic right before you're putting it in or something like that. But like mentally, it's nice. You just chop you do all your chopping, and then you can put that away. And then you're focused only on the like cooking part now, on the heat part. So everyone's different, but I think that helps a lot.
I feel like I'm so lazy, Mo. Like I was chopping garlic earlier in the summer with Sarah at her house, and then I got home and we had like garlic kind of like pre-chopped in the little like, whatever you call that thing, shaker. And like, is that garlic worse? Does that not taste as good? Do you feel like it's like fresher if you chop it up like the moment?
I've heard that it's worth chopping it up, but also like if that jar or whatever like pre-cut thing is gonna make you cook more, like why not? And I think also like I say that I like cooking and stuff, but like we like to order once or twice a week too, and we enjoy that too. And like I think as soon as it becomes a huge chore, then it becomes not fun.
Right. Yeah, no, I feel like if you also pick a day when you want to order, it's almost like an anticipation. God, I can't talk. Anticipation thing. Where you kind of know like, okay, this is my like order out day and I don't have to cook, and then like you can pick like where you want to order. So looking forward to things is always nice.
Yep, definitely.
But okay. And then sort of on the topic of cooking as well. And I know we're pretty much over time already, Mo. So this could be the last thing.
If anyone's still listening.
Facts. Because like I wanted to ask you about this in the beginning, but we started talking about medicine, classic pre-meds.
Classic.
It was great. But so I wanted to just kind of like, this is what one of the things I was most excited about was just hearing about your experience growing up in Japan, but then you also have the London element and the Hawaii element.
Hmm.
And like, I feel like you and I have never really talked about this too
Yeah.
deeply. And so I don't know if I have any like preset questions, but like I know you went to an American school in Japan,
Yep.
right? So can you kind of like talk about that and like is that different than the normal schooling system in
Hmm.
Japan and like what kind of led you down that path? And then I
Definitely.
think you mentioned there was a lot of diversity in that school, so people from
Hmm.
everywhere and like what is Japan like? Like I've
Yeah.
heard like I just want to hear more about it. Like it's pretty cool, right?
Let me try to do my home country some justice.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I was born and raised in Japan for basically most of my life. I lived there until I was 18,
Tokyo
in
in Japan?
Tokyo.
Okay.
So people ask, like, where in Japan? I was in Tokyo, in the city, in the hustle and bustle, but I
Hmm.
tell them it's not as crazy as New York because it really isn't.
Really?
It's not as dense and
Okay.
there's not as, yeah, it's a little more spread out and residential, I think. But that's where I grew up. Throughout my entire like educational career, I had been going to some form of international school. And the ones that I went to in particular were the American international schools. So what that means is the education system and the curriculum taught is based on the American curriculum. So it's
Okay.
at my high school, for example, we had AP US history, we had
Mm,
AP world history, AP calc, like things that students in the US would have taken too. Um, the biggest difference maybe is that like Japanese was more of like a mandatory language requirement. So
mm.
I had Japanese class every single day for an hour, but then everything else like chemistry, math, all of that, science, math, English, language arts, that kind of stuff. Social studies wasn't taught in English,
Wow.
using like American textbooks and whatnot. Um, so this is actually very different from what would have happened if I'd gone to Japanese school, because in
Okay.
Japanese school, everything is taught in Japanese. And the textbooks, for example, I think are, they have national textbooks. And
Mm,
so sort of the consequence of that is, yes, now I speak, honestly, English is my first language now. It
wow.
wasn't my first language. Like I learned to speak Japanese earlier, but now I'm way more fluent in English.
Mm,
Um, and I consider it my first language. But um, that's mainly because I did all of my reading and writing and even math and science in English. And
yeah.
so I don't have any of that terminology in Japanese. Um, but because my mother and my entire mother's side is Japanese and mostly just speak Japanese, I
Hmm.
was fortunate to sort of have that language. Um, not even, I didn't have to learn it. It was just part of me when I grew up. It was always being spoken around
Right.
me. And obviously I had the classes at school too, but it was very much not like learning a second language at all.
Okay.
So that's sort of like my educational path. My dad, who is technically my stepdad, but
Hmm.
he, has been my father figure since I was 4 or 5.
Hmm.
He's American, so he had a huge influence on where I sort of ended up with college and wanting to go to the US.
Wow.
Um, and also just me going to international school and staying in international school throughout the whole like
Hmm.
middle school, high school journey. Um, and so, yeah, I decided I wanted to go. Honestly, it wasn't even in my head that I would potentially go to college in Japan by the time I was in high school,
Wow.
because my high school was filled with students who just had the goal of going to college in the US. And we
Right.
had counselors that were trained to get kids into colleges in the US.
Okay.
So in fact, I would be going against the grain, or like, I wouldn't have had the skills to go into normal Japanese system
Interesting.
colleges, I think. Um, and also because my Japanese isn't as strong, I think. And so I didn't even really question it when I was applying to college, in terms of why I ended up choosing, going to a liberal arts school, like that was a big thing for me because I knew medicine had always sort of been part of like, maybe I want to be a doctor, but I wasn't sure. And in Japan, you sort of choose at 18 whether or not you're going to become a doctor, and you go straight into it. And so I knew I wanted to learn more about everything. And that was what liberal arts is, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's why I ended up looking at those schools mainly, and then ended up at Princeton, which has been an amazing place. And I met wonderful people like you. So that's sort of my background.
Wow.
And then obviously because of my father, I've also had this American influence within the house as well. So it's sort of like a meshing of Japanese and American culture within my household. And then sort of where London comes into the mix, honestly, it was just this year or last year that my father, after 20 whatever years in Japan, got a new job in London. And so they relocated there. And so my immediate family now lives in London. But yeah, Japan is what I consider home and where I grew up. And the last, I guess, detail that you mentioned is Hawaii. Right? So my parents have a apartment in Hawaii. So we were very fortunate we got to escape the cold winter months and spend a good chunk of the year in Hawaii during the summers and the winters. And it's, I did actually a lot of my internships and stuff there. So I got to know not just the like island as an outsider, like traveling there, but also I got to work there and see some of the communities there. And it's really cool. Hawaii itself is also very diverse, much more diverse than Japan. And you have people from all different cultures and they identify as American, but also they identify themselves as sort of separate from the mainland Americans. So yeah, I will always have a special, place in my heart for Hawaii, and I hope I can go back there after the pandemic. But yeah.
Wow. Well, I literally have so many questions. I'm trying to keep this brief because I know we're like almost over an hour now, but wow. Okay. So that's amazing. And so you explained kind of the difference between American and Japanese schooling system, and then sort of like where London came in, and then Hawaii. And then I guess one of my questions is like, did your dad meet your mom, your stepdad meet your mom like on work, or was like, how did that happen? Just kind of curious.
Yeah. They actually met at work. She was working as like a secretary in the same financial firm that he was working for at the time, which no longer exists.
Okay.
This was pre-2008. But that's where they met. And then, the rest is sort of history.
And then what's like the climate like? I feel this came to my mind. Because you mentioned, this is why it came to my mind, that it's colder in Japan. For some reason, I never even, in the winter, but I never even thought of like, what's it like versus the Northeast, for example, where you're in New York City right now?
I would say it's actually slightly milder than New York City. Definitely than like New England. The one thing is the summers are very, very hot. So like late July, August is very hot and humid.
I heard that.
The humidity is awful. But the spring and fall are beautiful. And the winter, depending on where you are in Japan, like some areas will get a lot of snow and you can ski and all that. And then, but Tokyo is a little more mild. So you only get snow maybe once or twice a winter.
Okay.
And it's not ever a huge amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting. And then you said you were living like right there in the city in Tokyo, not quite as dense as New York City. And so, what was sort of the culture? This is like an interesting question, I feel like, to think about, because like I went to a public high school in the suburbs. So there's like a different culture than, like a private school in the suburbs or a private school in the city of America. And so it's just like interesting to think, what was your culture like at your high school? And especially it was also people coming from different places. So did you was it boarding or like?
It wasn't boarding. It was
boarding.
Normal day school, but
okay.
Sort of to I always think of sort of the international school community as a little bit of a bubble, because definitely we're private schools, so the student body in general, I don't want to speak for everybody, but like, especially compared to, for example, my college group friends or whatever, like everyone kind of came from a similar socioeconomic background,
Okay.
and we're in general very privileged to be, because the tuition is a lot, to be able to have that kind of American education in Japan.
Right.
So definitely, I think when we talk about diversity in terms of socioeconomic diversity, like I got so much of that once I got to college, and I didn't realize I was missing out on that, or like how unaware I was of that. So definitely that is something, but it was really cool just to grow up with people, I think, who didn't necessarily associate themselves with a single culture. And for me, that happened to be like Japanese and American culture, but also there are people who were children that grew up in a bunch of different international schools around the world because their parents needed to travel for work every few years and relocate. So, you know, I had friends that grew up partially in Pakistan and then Switzerland, and then somehow ended up in Japan for high school. So that was really cool. But I think we also have our own identity. They often also say like third culture kid, where like I think it's like an overused or a little cliche term, but like not fitting in with a single identity, and it's more like that international identity that they identify with. But yeah, I think that was something, it never really bothered me as a kid that I didn't fit in necessarily, but I don't think I necessarily saw it as a benefit or like something really positive that has helped me until honestly when I was writing my med school applications.
For sure.
And writing the secondaries, like reframing it as not like I don't fit in as completely Japanese or completely American, but more like I am able to see the viewpoints of both sides, or, you know, see the differences and the similarities between people of different cultures. Yeah.
I love how you're able to frame that differently, right? That's a huge takeaway. Because that's one thing that I, you know, kind of admire, right? Is that I feel like it's all kind of set up for me, and that, you know, I have my friends from home, and like we're all kind of from the same place, and it's just, it's very easy to like bond with those people because you have all those similarities and just shared experiences. But you were kind of just brought up in a different environment where there was always that bicultural situation and like multicultural, because people are coming from literally everywhere. And so I think that might have, you know, potentially made it hard for you, or like feel like, oh, I don't know, you know, where I do fit in, like you said. But I think you have such a superpower and such a skill, you know, because you have that experience, and I just think it's dope. And so thanks for like sharing about that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And my grandfather, who is very un-Japanese, when you go for the stereotype that a lot of Japanese people like to conform to the crowd and sort of not like to stick out like a sore thumb. Like my grandfather was the complete opposite of that. He was a fashion designer and like loved loud clothing and stuff. But I remember when I interviewed him for some school project, he always said, like, you should sort of treasure your differences, and like it's a good thing to stand out from the crowd. And I think not even just like being a Japanese person or anything like that, just like as a teenage girl growing up, I always wanted to fit in with the crowd or like look like everyone else, right? And so I think about his comments now that I'm older and like going through again like a med school process. It's all about how do you stand out, like how do you make yourself stand out. So it's like I think you have to learn that. I've learned that it's a good thing that I have all of these different experiences that set me apart from other people, and that makes me interesting. And yeah, it's not something to fear or like be ashamed about at all.
Exactly. I love it. Look at Mo. So inspirational. That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I feel like couldn't agree more with what you said, and major respect to your grandpa, man. It's awesome that you get to, you know, think about his words, you know, and have those words live on, because that's what it's all about, right? Just kind of leaving that impact. And so Mo, I feel like I took too much of your time already.
No,
But
I could talk to you forever, you know that.
Yeah, this was so fun. I feel like we mixed it up. covered a lot of topics,
Mix it
but
up.
we covered a lot. And so thank you again, Mo. This has been awesome. And I feel like I barely scratched the surface. So definitely want to have you back. And we'll obviously talk offline more for sure.
Yep.
But this is awesome, Mo. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone listening. If you even made it this far, y'all are champs.
For real.
Yeah, this has been super fun. And I can't wait for more sessions.
Amazing. Bless up. Peace.
Peace.